Welcome to the New World Order Showcase Podcast. Your host, Jill Hart, the Coach's Alchemist. Couldn't be more excited to have you join us today. On this podcast, we celebrate the champions of change, the up-and-coming life, health and transformational coaches who are fearlessly stepping forward to make a difference in the world. Get ready for inspiring stories, practical tips, and powerful moments that will motivate you to make a positive change in your life and those around you. We're happy to have you join us on this incredible journey as we dive into the world of life, health, and transformational coaches who are lighting up the path towards a better tomorrow.
Hi, and welcome to the New World Order Showcase podcast. I'm your host, Jill Hart, and with us today is Carin LaCount. Carin is an author and self-love coach who shifts ideas and perspectives around the notion of self-love, typical of society's skewed understanding of it, that of a deep spiritual concept. She helps clients find their connection to self through their own personal spiritual beliefs or helps them discover them. And then she takes you for a deep dive into developing and managing awareness around thoughts and feelings. The program educates you on the concepts around our soul's age, the various challenges, fears, powers, and desires, talents, and paths of the soul that have driven the soul to choose the particular life you are in, and how that leads to the soul's purpose. And lastly, how the purpose of the soul is naturally geared towards altruism, making a difference in the world through conscious and conscientious work. And it's the older soul that we're talking about here. So welcome to the show, Carin. I'm really delighted to have you with us and to learn more about what you mean by old souls and self-love, because I think your perspective on self-love is different than what normally we're kind of conditioned to understand it as. So
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having me on the show. I'm really excited to be here. And yeah, the notion of self-love typically is considered a self-care practice. So when I talk to people about self-love, they will talk about how they're taking care of themselves, what they're doing. You see on social media, they'll talk about going and get their nails done and getting a massage. And, I just did self-love today. And there's such a big difference between what self-care is and what self-love is, because self-love is connecting to that part of us that is the very foundation of our being, which is pure divine love. And so practicing self-love is a way deeper practice than the superficial declarations about how much we love ourselves and taking care of ourselves and taking care of our body. Self-love is digging in deep and becoming aware of the negative self-talk that we have and aligning ourselves as often as we possibly can when we see that negative self-talk with the love that's within us and feeling how much we deserve that love.
The actual feeling of being loved by source, God, whatever you want to call it, but that supernatural entity that exists within all of us, that we're taught to look to external sources for that rather than to ourselves, as though acknowledging that love is somehow selfish.
Yes, my program goes into, in the very first module, the concepts that are taught in A Course in Miracles around the idea of the ego and why it is in particular that we do have this sense of we don't deserve this love. We feel shame and guilt. And so we push that love away. These are all barriers that we have constructed in our mind against the love within us. And the more that we can become aware of that and understand and have compassion for ourselves, for the ego part of us that is steeped in these other emotions around, as I said, guilt and fear and judgment, and align ourselves with the love and really understand that we deserve that love, so much so that it's not even that we deserve it, that it's what we are.
Yeah. And that's really the key to all of it, is that we are love. We are all connected. We are all part of the one. So it's not about deserving. It's just about being.
Yeah. Well, and I find it fascinating in that the studies of quantum physics are really diving into this even more and more. And so there is such a aversion to all that is woo, and this is considered woo, but in fact, it's actually science. There is the way the world is set up, we are the matter that we see around us, the things that we can feel and touch, that's only 0.00001% of what is actually what we're made of. If you look at an atom is mostly energy. The particles within it is such a tiny little fraction of it. And that energy is this love. It is what we are made of.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a really important distinction that I like to make in what I'm teaching, because I think once we can get over all the other stuff that's going on in our head that our ego is driving, we can understand more succinctly who we are and why that love is so important. And again, that's what the first module of my program is about. I just felt that it was so important to bring in the philosophy of Course in Miracles, which is really pulling in the philosophy of the baseline of all religions, this idea that we, at our core, are divine love. That is the image in which we are created of our creator.
Mm-hmm.
I forget what it says, something about we are created in the image of our creator. And that's what it is. It's this energy, it's this love.
Yeah. And how did you get to this point? Let's roll back just a little bit and hear your story, because your story is a journey that so many people can relate to. And I would be remiss if I didn't have you share it. So
Yeah. Well, to go way back, I feel as though, well, I know that I am an old soul. And what an old soul means is someone who's been through many reincarnations. And being an old soul, it's made me someone who's always, questioning, really wanting to get the answers around why we're here, what this whole world is about, why we suffer. And at the age of 6, my mother died very suddenly. She had asked me a few nights earlier, what would you ever do if I died? It was, this question of this overwhelmed mother of 5 children who was just like, so I'm asking her to do something again. And she's like, well, what would you ever do if I died? And for me, I took that very literally. I didn't know a mother could die. And I was so fraught with questions that I couldn't even answer. And so then about a week later, when she tucks me into bed in the next morning, my dad tells me she's in the hospital, she's had a brain aneurysm, and she's not going to survive. And I took that on as being my fault. I didn't answer her question, and so she was leaving me. And that, along with the way my dad parented and my stepmother who came along a couple years later, I developed some very deep people-pleasing tendencies. And that set me up for the relationships that I had going forward in my adulthood, and ended up marrying a man who very insecure. And he, I was a people pleaser and he took advantage of that, because narcissism is really, codependency and narcissism are the opposite sides of the same coin.
Mhm.
A deficiency in self-love. And so my 27 years with him and the autoimmune condition that also plagued my life since marrying him, I had ulcerative colitis, so I was in and out of the hospital, and toward the end needing blood transfusions. And it got to a point where I was in the hospital and bled out to such a degree I almost didn't survive. And
Wow.
in the hospital, or actually in the ambulance, because I was in the hospital and that hospital couldn't manage my case anymore. They had to send me to another hospital 2 hours away. So in that ambulance, I really got honest with myself about why this was happening, because I understood with all of the study that I've been doing that our health issues are always a byproduct of our emotional, our internal. And I kept trying to figure out what that was and figure out what that was. And by this point, actually, I had divorced my husband. I'd been divorced for him for 2 years. And so when I divorced him, I thought I kicked that habit. I was going to be done with this god-awful disease, but it came back to me in such a vengeance that I was fighting for my life. And so I had come to realize that even though I had divorced him, I was still caught up in codependent tendencies. I was still trying to get validation from him and from everyone else around me about what I'd been through and whether I was doing things right. And I just had no love for myself. And that's what had prompted me to write the book and really investigate this whole pursuit of self-love. And I want to back up a little bit, because I don't believe anybody is actually without self-love, because it is who we are. So we can't be without what we are. But really understanding that and tapping into that love when we are in our darkest, lowest points is what self-love is all about. And the more that we can use that, utilize that in our actions, our decisions, and align ourselves more with the love and less with the fear, that is practicing self-love. That is going to change how your life turns out.
I think you made a really interesting point there about self-love versus fear. And so much of our lives are driven by fear of missing out, fear of dying, fear of losing something that we covet. Those are the three big fears. But
Yeah.
everybody struggles with those. And instead of being able to just relax into the moment, it's not like you shouldn't plan for the future, but you shouldn't be so consumed about what the next moment is going to bring without enjoying the present moment. And I think that's where the self-love can kind of be, you can capture it. You can only capture it in the now, I
Right.
guess is what I'm trying to say, versus I'll be happy when. And I'll be happy when generally means I will love myself. I will allow myself to experience love when insert whatever criteria you feel that you need to insert in there.
Right. Well, I always teach that in every single moment, we have the choice to align our decisions with fear or to align our decisions with love. And having an awareness around that fact right there can get us through so many of the more awful moments. And I've suffered pretty intensely with depression off and on. And with depression often comes this feeling that I just don't want to be here anymore. I'm done with this. This is so hard. And there's suicidal ideations and there's suicidal plans, which, you know, I never really went so far as that. But I had, if you wouldn't mind me reading a little section in my book, there was a time in my life where I was just so completely immersed in depression, I didn't know how I was going to get past it. So I started the habit of taking a bath nearly every night. I'd soak in the tub for hours, sobbing and listening to an ever-expanding Spotify playlist that I'd created, which I called Embrace My Heart. I collected songs that made me cry, made me smile, made me feel the pain I'd buried for decades, and made me feel strong. Spotify and the bubble baths were my security blanket. I immersed myself in the tub and the music and felt safe to embrace any damn emotion my heart brought to the surface. It was comical to think of anyone spying on me. They would see a mad woman crying, then laughing, then dancing, yes, while horizontal in the tub, and then outright bawling uncontrollably in a 5-minute time span over and over for hours. My fingers pickled, proving how much time I dedicated to processing my pain, to loving myself and taming the beast. I felt 1,000 times lighter after those baths, as if I'd washed away several pounds of debris from my body. But then a few hours later, I'd feel the weight of more pain, which would rise from an infinite source of hell bubbling up from my soul. Dying became a lovely thought. I fantasized about a fresh prescription of Ambien. I visualized myself opening the cupboard in my bathroom, popping off the childproof cap, and downing the entire bottle of the tiny white pills. Then I'd sob as I pictured my kids' lives at the mercy of their father. With me alive, he was a lousy parent. If I died, he'd be an abomination. He was only capable of thinking of himself. The children would have no nurturing, no unconditional love if I were gone. This wound is going to cancel me out. The lyrics of singer Nathaniel Rateliff in his song Still Trying came through my headphones as I soaked in the tub. It began to reverberate through my head, so I used it like a pickaxe to work out the thought deep in my mind. I knew it was a dark and ugly thought, but my curiosity was piqued. The thought was embedded in my solid intentions of keeping the depression at bay, but this particular verse drove me with blind determination to unbury it. To my horror, listening to the verse finally let free the thought that came to my mind. Ever wonder why a mother who commits suicide takes her children with her? It's not selfishness. It's because she can't bear to leave them suffering in the world without a mother. Oh my God. My labors had unearthed the horror of horrors and no mind wants to see. Of course, I would never, ever, but the thought showed me that the intensity of my depression was far worse than I'd imagined. I had actually entertained the thought of ending it all. I prayed for guidance. Dear heart, show me how to be here for them. I hurt so bad, I can physically feel the pain like a sharp dagger slowly pressed into my chest. I can feel the piercing of my skin, the cracking of the bone, and the slow motion of the blade as it slices through my heart. I'm always here. I will always hold you, heart replied. Feel what you must and trust that I will never let it consume you. At that moment, I committed to trusting my heart, to shifting my fantasy from committing suicide to becoming more deeply determined to survive. I would see the three of us through this nightmare. So that is
powerful.
Yeah, that is the definition of self-love that I'm talking about, that we can tap into, even into our lowest, darkest moments, and let go of any sort of idea that we're doing anything wrong, that we don't deserve that love, that we are needing to be doing we get in our head and tell ourselves that we need to do all these things before we can have anything good. But this is just a demonstration of how we can be in the most awful place in our mind and still have that place where we're loved.
Wow. So why do you think society is confused about self-love? What do you think drives that?
Well, it's again pointing to the first module of my course. It is the lack of trust that we deserve self-love. And people battle in their minds constantly over the ideas that religion teaches us. And the problem with religion is that it is so steeped in fear and drives so much of the guilt and shame and all of that that we really need to get away from. And so then too often people are just tossing out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. They're just, they don't want to align or think about religion. And so then they throw out spirituality altogether. And understanding that and having a deeper understanding of where in our decisions does that guilt that we don't deserve to have goodness reside, and picking apart what that really looks like so that we can get back to the source of it and root that out, and then move forward in our decisions and how we behave and just relate to other people even.
I wonder sometimes if it isn't a matter of looking externally and taking on the opinions of society in general. I mean, what's really profound what you were talking about a woman taking her kids with her. I I once contemplated suicide, but my husband, his mom committed suicide, and I could never do that because I couldn't do to my children what his mom did to him.
Right.
I just like, as bad as everything was, that
Yeah.
was just not going to happen. But to allow yourself the freedom to really examine what you're thinking about. You know, people talk about, oh, I'm going to commit suicide, or, but they don't allow themselves to really think through all the whole process without having to act on it. You don't have to act on every thought that comes into your head. You can just examine it
Mhm.
and think about the thought
Right.
and not have an opinion about it.
Right.
Um, so why do you think it's so important for society that we all figure this self-love thing out?
Well, because it is such a beautiful aspect of ourselves, an untapped resource within ourselves, that the more that each of us can tap into that, the more love we have for ourselves, naturally, then the more love we have for society, for others. And it drives our decisions to align with love and not fear. So we don't have this fear that others are going to take something from us, or this, fear that someone else doing, living their life the way that they're living it is wrong, and we need to judge that. And a lot of our judgments are projections onto other people of our own fears. So if we had love for ourselves and didn't feel that judgment, we wouldn't judge. And so often judgment creates such negative karma for people. It judgments to an extreme have caused people to commit suicide. And so when society is able to really understand self-love and align themselves with love and not fear, because that's the thing that is interesting in my studies on narcissism, is that most people, if you talk about self-love, they think that means narcissistic behaviors, narcissistic attitudes, narcissists love themselves too much, and that's a problem because they do these awful things. But the opposite is true. They don't love themselves enough. And so that's what's driving their fearful behaviors. They're very insecure people. And because of that insecurity, they are making decisions and behaving in a way that is harmful to themselves and to others.
Yeah. And so let's switch gears just a minute and talk about an old soul and how you can figure out if you are an old soul and how that impacts our lives and how past lives and the choices that we make about coming into this life are shaped by our soul.
Yeah. Yeah, I also go into this in my course, and I've studied past lives for 30 some years. I've read so many books on it, but when I read Ainsley McLeod's The Instruction, that was so powerful for me because it really gave my scientific mind something to really grab onto. So past lives, oftentimes the conversation around past lives is just, oh, I was Cleopatra's sister in a past life. And, so it gets to be this
Oh,
like
so
cocktail party
glamorous.
conversation that really doesn't get us anywhere. And so the idea of past lives having, like, we go through 100 or more lives as an old soul. And the more lives that we've been through, the more we've experienced, the more empathy and compassion we develop for ourselves and for our fellow man. That's why people who are older souls are more averse to war and just the thinking that goes behind there's so much in politics that is driven toward me, 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 me. And so older souls tend to be letting go of all that and having this compassion for themselves and for others. But they also, as older souls, because they've seen it all, they have more issues with anxiety and complacency and just getting stuck in thinking, well, there's no point in doing anything because this is what happens all the time. And the purpose of our reincarnating and coming into lives over and over is because each time we come into a life, we have specific goals to overcome. And those goals become more and more altruistic the older we get. So as a younger soul, you may have, your point, your goal in life might be more self-centered. But as an older soul, your goal is going to be more focused on helping others, serving others, and how best to do that. And so understanding that we've chosen this particular life, we've chosen even the astrological sign that we have come in under to give our
Like message from beyond.
personality. Yeah, well, just to give our personality the various aspects that will help us accomplish whatever it is that we're coming into this life to accomplish. And those can be goals that are to better ourselves, but then they can also be goals that are to serve humanity on a greater scale as well.
I have to wonder, and this is just me wondering, if there aren't a number of old souls who come back and handicap themselves with relationships with their primary caregivers where they're not loved, forcing them to figure out this love thing as quickly as possible. And sometimes you do a better job at it than others as you go through your life. But yeah, I just wonder about that.
Well, in Ainsley's book, The Instruction, he talks about that. He addresses that is something that is called an investigation. And so when we come into a life, we have a council of spirit guides who help us decide which life we're going to choose, who our parents are going to be, so on and so forth. And he says that they absolutely never, ever choose a life in which we're going to be abused. And so there is still free will. So when we come into a life and our parents are abusive or neglectful, or in my case, just, not understanding unconditional love, and you get your love if you earned it, kind of thing. That is an investigation. So that is an opportunity for you to learn who you are, really learn this self-love thing, and have an opportunity to understand that you don't deserve to be treated like that, and to take steps away from people like that who are treating you that way, and to have that love and compassion for yourself that brings those people into your life who are going to help serve you and love you unconditionally and support you.
Interesting. I'm definitely gonna have to get that book.
Yeah.
It sounds
Yeah.
fascinating. So
Yeah.
how do you help people in your coaching practice? Is it one-on-one? Is it groups? Is it just a course? How does that look?
Yeah, well, I have the course, and I have one-on-one coaching, and I have group coaching. The course is specifically designed to give you the vocabulary and the concepts for the coaching, because I just feel that it's so important that you understand what self-love is, and you understand how to manage your energy, and you understand all the options that you have chosen when you came into this life. And so understanding your past lives, and understanding the mission that you've come into this world with, and the challenges, and so on and so forth. And so the course is really a precursor to any of the coaching, because then once you learn that information, having someone either in the group coaching, or if you're working with me one-on-one, to bounce ideas off of and dissect a decision you might have made, or a period in your life where things are where you struggled, and so on and so forth, with this new lens of love versus fear. And to have someone like myself to just keep bringing you back to what's the love here, where's the love, and letting go of the fear and the judgment and the guilt, because that's the thing that trips us up every time. And that the ego is very much a trickster, in that it can spin things in such a way that we think we're being loving. But if you've got someone who's got the perspective, such as a coach like myself, to help you see where that ego is tricking you again, and that in fact you are making that decision based on fear instead of love, and just to help guide you and support you through that.
I like that. And it's really necessary to have somebody that can say, hey, you're wandering off into the Tulies again. Because we all do it. Even people that recognize the patterns and have reached a point where they're like, okay, I know I can exist in the now. I can choose what I think about, and I have all the power, but there are days we just give it all away. It's like we fall into the old habits and patterns, and it's not easy, this thing called life. But
I do it to myself even still. You get a goal in mind, and you get so focused on achieving that goal, and you feel as though this is my passion, this is my goal, this is what I'm going to do. You keep pushing, 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 and you get yourself so overwhelmed that, in fact, that's where self-care comes in. That's where you need to take a step back and recognize, okay, I have been pushing myself too much, and now I am so fraught with fear that every decision is poisoned with that, and that is not serving me. And I need to take a step back, take a bubble bath, and go on a nature walk, do something to just calm my mind down so that I can reconnect to my heart, as I call it in the book, that part of you that loves you, that just loves you unconditionally, is always there, is never loud and in your face telling you what to do, but is just always holding you with that unconditional love. And
Still
anytime
small
you could do
voice.
that, yeah, it just helps clarity.
So you offer the 5 subconscious saboteurs of the old soul. It's a guide to help people what?
To understand themselves, to identify with being an old soul, which I always say, if you're still listening to me talk about this, then you're an old soul. So that's a given. And so that the 5 saboteurs are what I was talking about, like the anxiety and the complacency and the things that we have in our thinking brain that come from this idea that we've been through it all. We've seen so much. We've gone through we've been and done everything in and all. We've done over 100 lives. We've been the murderers and we've been murdered. We've been all of the things. And so we get tired, we get exhausted, and we become complacent. And we see, I think right now what's happening in this country politically is really scary. And so a lot of the old souls are freaking out badly because they can see what humans can do to one another and what could happen. And that's overwhelming them. But understanding that's coming from a place as being an old soul, and understanding that being an old soul, it just empowers you to let go of that fear again and align with the love. As an old soul, you also have a deeper understanding of the connectiveness of all humans. And so being able to tap into that and use that to pull yourself out of these places where you're stuck in fear and not really following your soul's purpose because you're just overwhelmed with all that.
I think I am an old soul, and I totally get exactly what you're talking about. And in terms of, you can look at the things that are sitting, the potential that sits on the horizon, and you can see, I can see what's coming, but I can also say to myself, but today is a good day, and I can enjoy today, and I can have joy and pleasure and enjoy life. And I don't have to take it on. And whatever's going to happen is going to happen. It's like you can watch a screen and it's a movie, because there really isn't anything you can do that's going to impact it personally. On a global scale, just having conversations like this and making people aware that there is another way to live, where that's filled with loving yourself to start with, but by loving yourself, you love others too. Yeah, that's so important. So how do people get your 5 subconscious saboteurs of the old soul, and how do they get in touch with you if they would like to learn more and perhaps work with you?
Yeah. So my website is Dr. So DrCarin LaCount. So that's drcarinlacount.com. And on there, you can get all of it. So on the front homepage, if you scroll down about halfway, you'll see where you can sign up to get the 5 saboteurs of the old soul. You can also see up in the menu where you can click the link to maybe take the course or sign up to work with me one-on-one. There's also a 21-day self-love challenge, and there is a self-love quiz. So I always recommend that people start with the if you're really wanting to dive into this, to start with the course, and then we would work together or get into the group coaching. So, but yeah.
And people can contact you just to have a conversation with you about which place they should start or if they should work with you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Correct.
Yep. There's a way to connect with me on the website. Otherwise, my email is Carin, again, Carin, at drcarinlacount.com.
Awesome. So this has been a fascinating conversation. I've really enjoyed it. What's the one thing you hope the audience takes away from our discussion today?
Oh, I would love for people to understand more deeply the concept of self-love and to know that in every moment they have the choice to align their behaviors and their decisions with fear or love. It's really
perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another empowering episode of the You World Order Showcase podcast. We hope you've enjoyed hearing from our incredible life, health, and transformational coaches who are making a profound impact on the world. Remember, change begins with you, and you have the power to transform your life and the lives of others. If you want to take that next step and unlock your true potential, visit thecoachesalchemist.com, where you can find the 3 ways we can help you for free to spin your talent into gold with clarity, a system, and a plan. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an inspiring episode. And if you enjoyed today's show, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us reach more people with our positive message. Stay connected with us on social media for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and upcoming guest announcements. You can find us on Facebook at the You World Order or simply visit thecoachesalchemist.com.